So when we say IPsec, IP stands for Internet Protocol and sec stands for security. I don't know whether you had a chance to learn about these layers in networking. So there are at least 5 major layers whenever we think about networking in place. So the layers begin with the very bottom layer, which is physical layer, and then the second one is on top of the physical layer we have data link layer, and then on top of the data link layer we have something called an internet layer, and then on top of the internet layer we have transport layer, and finally we have this top layer called application layer. And IPsec actually operates on the internet layer, so that's why the name actually has it's mentioned to the internet protocol, because one of the most obvious protocol used on the internet layer is this internet protocol. So we often talk about IPsec transparency, and to understand why IPsec is transparent, especially to applications, we need to go back and discuss the layer at which it operates. So as you can see in the figure shown here, there are multiple network layers, and IPsec chose to operate at the, as we already discussed earlier in the previous slide, the internet layer. So right here, the layer at which it operates is this internet layer. And what this really means is that, as you can see, where the application's running, whatever is being done on this internet layer is insulated by this transport layer. So even if you introduce IPsec here at the internet layer, it's really not visible to the application layer at all. So it doesn't really affect anything that's going on in terms of network applications using a network infrastructure. So that definitely leads to some cost savings, because especially when it comes to implementations and operations of these applications, they don't really have to be changed to accommodate the adoption of the IPsec at all. So one last remaining question is IPsec transparent to applications? The answer is, of course, yes. So IPsec can be run in 2 primary modes, and one of them is called the transport mode. In the transport mode, 2 hosts are connected directly to each other, so we also call it a host-to-host mode, as you can see. So you have this host 1 in the transport mode, another host 2, and the 2 hosts are connected directly using IPsec, and whatever is going through between the 2 hosts, all the data that's going back and forth between the 2 hosts, basically they're protected by encryption or encrypted. So that's why we call this end-to-end protection, because whatever going through the 2 hosts, it's completely encrypted. There is one downside of this approach, although protection is pretty strong, which is the cost, because if you want to set up your machines, your hosts, and your organization to support this IPsec transport, you have to set up every machine individually, and each of these hosts, they require special software to be installed on them. So the cost of installation of the software and also the maintenance is overwhelming. Another thing about IPsec in transport mode is that it's not really firewall friendly, because firewalls cannot inspect what's going through between the two hosts, because everything between the two IPsec hosts is encrypted. So for example, in this figure, let's say these two boxes represent one network, another two boxes here represent another network, and as we already talked about, IPsec host 1 and IPsec host 2, the data going through the network, everything's encrypted. So let's say this is your firewall 1 and firewall 2. Firewalls, I mean, even if they're looking at the traffic, since it's all encrypted, you cannot really do any inspections at the firewalls. There is also another IPsec mode called tunnel mode, and this mode is also called a site-to-site mode, because what's happening in this mode is only the traffic between IPsec gateways is encrypted in the mode. So the role of the IPsec gateways in this case is either encryption or decryption. So to give an example, as you can see in this figure, host 1 and host 2 are behind firewall and firewall 2, and IPsec gateways are actually connected. So what's happening is, in between the IPsec gateways, all the traffic is encrypted when it's going through the internet. However, as soon as you get out of the IPsec gateway, going into this particular network, things become unencrypted. So firewalls now can inspect what's in the traffic, and then it's basically sent to this host, and same goes to the other network. Everything behind the IPsec gateway is unencrypted and then sent to the host. So the only place where the encryption is really going on is just in between these two IPsec gateways. Other than that, everything within the networks is in plain text. So the IPsec gateway here, when they're sending the traffic outside the network, they encrypt it, and then when they receive the traffic, they decrypt it and send it on to the host in its own network. So here are some tunnel mode characteristics you need to be aware of. So when it comes to the cost, tunnel mode is less expensive to implement, because unlike the transport mode, the only place where you need to install the software and maintain it is at the IPsec gateways, as you saw in the figure. And it is also more firewall friendly, because as soon as you pass by the IPsec gateways, everything now becomes plain text, so firewalls can inspect what's going through in the traffic. And there is also a downside to this approach or this mode, because no protection within the respective two networks behind the IPsec gateways is provided, because everything is now turned into plain text, and anybody inside the network can actually see what's going through the network.